You are listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
Support for Rootbound comes from plants like yew. That's Y-E-W. Yew, the common ornamental evergreen. Yew, not Y-O-U. You get it? Thanks to you.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Rootbound. My name is Steve, and right here at the top of the show, I want to talk about the concepts of evergreen versus deciduous. Later, when I talk to the guest, you'll see that one of the plants we talk about today is an evergreen and the other one is deciduous, and that got me thinking about those topics. And, you know, I remember the basics, and I think we probably all do, like, what those two words mean. Evergreen is pretty clear. That's a tree that stays green all the time. And then deciduous, those are the trees that lose their leaves in the winter. But the first thing I thought about is like, wait, what is the root of that word deciduous? Evergreen is clear, green forever. But deciduous is not as clear, so I had to look it up, and it turns out the etymology is based off of a Latin word, decidere. Perhaps it's pronounced decidere, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, it is a Latin word that means to fall down or to fall off. So something that is deciduous is something that has that characteristic of falling off or down. So that makes sense. I thought that was cool. And then the other thing I was thinking about with these two concepts is, why is there a difference? Why is there these two kinds of things? And, you know, I think there probably have been lots of academic work about this, and I'm probably only scratching the surface here. I know I'm only scratching the surface here, but what I was able to look up and kind of understand and absorb for myself is that it is essentially it's essentially two different strategies of resource management, essentially, that trees have developed. So deciduous trees, you know, they decide in the winter, hey, there's not a really a lot of chance to do photosynthesis. One, the days are shorter. Two, it's kind of too cold for this process to take place. And so instead of having my leaves just sitting out there evaporating water all winter and losing water, let's just drop them, and we'll just absorb the energy and the minerals back from them, drop them, and then we'll make new ones in the spring and start photosynthesizing again. And then evergreens, it's a little bit different. Their strategy is like, hey, let's develop these specialized leaves that don't evaporate a lot of water. And because they're small and normally waxy, they don't evaporate a lot of water, and that means I can keep them all winter, even when I'm not photosynthesizing because it's too cold. But as soon as the sun starts, warms up and I can start photosynthesizing, I don't have to waste that energy creating new leaves. So that's kind of the just different strategies that were developed and evolved over time for managing that process. But it seems that evergreens seem to be a bit more successful in the colder climates. That strategy seems to work out pretty well for them. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I could probably go down a rabbit hole on these two concepts even further. It was really interesting to learn. But we'll just leave it there for today and continue on with our guest.
Why is spring the favorite season for deciduous trees? Because they are so relieved.
Hey, Eoin, how's it going?
Hi, Steve.
Welcome to the show. Do you have a plant to share with us?
Of course I have a plant to share with you.
Great. What is it?
I'm going to talk about a plant that you don't really see everywhere, but I'm from Ireland and you see it everywhere there. My parents, they came to visit me for Easter. I don't live in Ireland anymore. And they were remarking about how open the fields were in Switzerland. Everything green, everything expansive. And they said that you wouldn't see that in Ireland. And,
interesting.
Ireland has its 40 shades of green.
Uh-huh.
So, this island is full of hedgerows and ditches and sections and shrubs and hedges. And what I'd like to talk about today is a shrub called gorse.
Gorse?
Gorse, G-O-R-S-E. A horse with a G.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of it?
Gorse is a gorse. No, I have not heard of gorse.
Well, a gorse is a gorse, of course.
Of course. I'm excited to learn about gorse.
All
I'm going to need
right.
all the descriptions because I have no basis of it. Maybe I mean
Right.
I've been to Ireland. Maybe I have seen it but not paid attention.
There's a good chance you've seen it. If you left Dublin, if you left any, if you went into any part of rural Ireland, you would have seen it. It's everywhere.
Okay.
It's a sort of a thorny evergreen.
Mhm.
It has yellow flowers,
Mm.
and it's actually part of the pea family.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Is it like a shrub or is it a vine or what is
it's a
it? How does
shrub,
it?
so
Mhm.
it forms hedgerows, and it's quite prickly. It grows. You see it a lot around cliff edges and beaches. You also see it
Interesting.
in off farms because apparently the prickly thorns of the gorse are good for keeping animals at bay because they don't like the prickles.
Ah,
So
okay. Very
farmers like
interesting.
gorse. However, gorse makes the headlines every so often because it's quite flammable.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. You'll hear a lot about gorse fires, and these are
Wow.
like the Irish equivalent of an Icelandic volcano, where there's
Oh,
smoke on near by the airport. I don't think it's ever actually closed an airport, but yeah, it's a lot of put the emergency services to the test a good few times, even quite recently. It's um, all year round. You have
um,
gorse, and all year it's in bloom.
interesting. So, beyond it being, from the country you're from, is there any other reason why you chose gorse as a plant? Is something meaningful to you?
Because it's something I was actually reading recently about it, or I actually came up in something randomly because you know it's in bloom as it is always in bloom, but there was a comment that apparently it smells like coconut, but
Oh,
not
okay.
everybody can smell that smell. It's some sort of genetic factor, and about 25% of people can't smell gorse. And I don't know because I never paid that much attention to it when it was everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm sort of stranded here wanting to know, can I smell gorse or can't I? So that got me just, sent me down the rabbit hole recently. I'm not from the countryside, so,
Uh-huh.
but it's something that, yeah, it's sort of like the type of thing, you don't miss it till it's gone, or you don't know what you
Mhm.
got till it's gone. And
Indeed. Do you have any memories of like being around it, like going out to the country as a kid and like having your parents say like don't get scraped on that stuff or, I don't know, how does that like fit in your like memory of growing
not
up in
quite.
Ireland?
It was just something that was always there.
Uh-huh.
My grandmother's house. She lived in a house with quite a large garden, and yeah, it was just surrounded by gorse everywhere.
Very interesting. Let's talk about that name Gorse. Do you know anything about the name?
Well, gorse is only one of the names.
Mm-hmm.
It's also known as the firs or the whin.
Okay.
Now, firs, and then it's kind of there's a park near my parents' home, and there's a place in it called the Furry Glen. And
Ah,
while researching gorse, I realized it's not furry for any other reason. It's furry because of the furs or of because of the gorse that are there
interesting.
or were there at some point.
I'm googling it now so I can get a
Yeah.
better sense of it. And yeah, it's interesting. It looks when you said evergreen, I was still imagining it having like broader leaves, but it has more like piney needle kind of
Hmm.
leaves. But those are the sharp bits as well, right? The needles
Yeah.
themselves are kind of sharp.
Yep. Prickles,
Interesting.
so to speak.
And,
Yeah.
and so I guess the furs that comes from like fir trees are also look similar. Do you think that's a similar name, like why it's called first, or is there some other reason? Is that coincidence?
Possibly, but then again, are the furs related to the peas?
No, which that I mean,
So
when you said it's related to pea, it's really really interesting because it doesn't look like you know uh, most evergreens that I think about, but I don't know that much about them. I'm gonna have to look into that. And then win. Oh, I see. Furze is spelled Furze.
yeah,
Interesting. And then win is that? Do you know anything about that name?
I don't.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
I know it has gorse, and I remember we did some poetry in school a long time ago, and there was poems about the whin. So I guess there's certain dialects.
Do you remember any of those poems?
There was one called "A Christmas Childhood" by Patrick Kavanagh. That's a long time ago. Yeah,
don't
I
have it
don't remember the
memorized.
poem. I
I'll,
do not.
I'll, I'll
I
look
did
it
at
up.
one point.
Yeah. I was wondering if it's one of those things, every now and then there's something that sticks in your brain when you're a kid. Like, I can still, well, probably not fully, but I used to be able to recite the Jabberwock, from Alice in Wonderland, and I still can get certain lines of that out. So I was curious like that. It's weird what those things stick in your brain for so long.
Mm. No, I ejected as much poetry from my brain as I could once I left school and didn't have to do literature anymore.
So going back to the smell thing, that's really interesting that it, yeah, I wonder what the science behind that about why certain people can smell it and other people it just smells like nothing. Is that what?
I believe so. Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder what other things out there are like that of that have smells for certain people. It reminds me a little bit of the cilantro thing that some people
Mhm.
taste soap
Yeah.
when they taste cilantro, and whether that's genetic or something else. But yeah, very
I
interesting.
think there's a similar thing with cucumbers,
Oh,
and
I didn't.
I'm not quite sure. I read that somewhere. And of course, there's asparagus and its excretion.
That's true. I definitely have that one. Um,
I never ate
Interesting.
asparagus for years. I only discovered it recently enough. So
Interesting. Well, you're in the right place for good asparagus.
I
Europe
am.
is really good. Um, yeah. Do you have any other fun facts about gorse?
Well, it's always in bloom, and they do say that kissing your lover is only permitted when the gorse is in bloom. So because it's always in bloom, you can,
That's
it's
good.
found its foot in folklore and literature, and given its flammability, also it was used a lot for fuel. So for kilns and sort of cottage industry in
Does
the
I guess it gets like like the wood gets like not too big but reasonably enough that you can like use it. It's not like a small shrub. It can get like decently woody.
it
And
can
whatnot.
grow up to a couple of meters high,
Okay.
but it still stays. It's not like a tree trunk,
Hmm.
but yeah, the whole thing can be hard. And apparently, once it's burnt, like post gorse fire, they're quite resilient and they'll come back again.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's no getting rid of those. So consequently, it is considered to be quite an invasive species. Although it's quite prominent, I believe, also in Spain and in the UK.
Interesting. And is it native to Ireland?
It is.
Yeah,
So I believe.
that's interesting.
But
I wonder
since when?
if its flammability is it like extra resinous or something like that, or does it just dry easily, or it's
There's some
pretty
quite
interesting.
volatile molecules that it creates. Terpenoids or terpenes or isoprenes. Maybe they're isoprenes. I don't remember.
Interesting. So yeah, it produces a lot of like flammable stuff. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, maybe we have the renewable fuel of the future on our doorsteps.
Gorse fires are smoking, but primroses burn, and celandines, and white may, and gorse flowers.
Do you mind if I share a plant with you?
Please do, Steve.
So yeah, interestingly, I think we both chose plants that are really common that people don't notice. Um, and this is a plant that's all over this part of the country that I live in Virginia, but also all over just the eastern United States. And it's got quite a fun name. It is called Virginia Creeper, which is not an insult that you call someone from Virginia, but it's what the name of the plant is. And it's called Virginia Creeper because it creeps along the ground or creeps up walls. It's actually quite a climber. Um, it is in the grape family, which is the Vitaceae family, but its Latin name is Parthenocissus quinquefolia. And so I brought a little example, which the audience can't see, but just to give you an example, this is the leaf of the Virginia creeper, and it's quinquefolia because the leaves have 5 leaflets. It's a compound leaf made of 5 leaflets. And then these grow. They grow along the ground, but they will climb up anything they can find. And they're in the they kind of, I think, serve the same niche in the landscape as ivy does in Europe, but it's over here. Unlike ivy, though, they are deciduous, so the leaves fall off in the winter, and they do turn a really beautiful red color
Okay.
in the fall, which is really cool. And yeah, I've been like interested in this plant since we bought this house, and I saw it growing, and I've been using that app I we were texting about that I talked about in episode 3, and that's when I first learned about it. I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Virginia Creeper." And yeah, I think it's a really cool plant, and so now the way I'm thinking about it is, we do also have a lot of ivy in our yard, which ivy here is highly invasive and grows like crazy, but doesn't really have the same like ecological purpose. There's not as many animals that will eat it as they do the Virginia Creeper. So my long-term goal is to try to discourage the ivy and encourage the Virginia Creeper in their yard. So that's kind of an ongoing project for me. But the more I've looked into it, it's like a really interesting plant. When ivy climbs, and I talked about this in an episode, I forget how many episodes ago I talked about ivy. When ivy climbs, its little rootlets try to get inside crevices and actually like grow, like the rootlets at first will grow away from the light because it tries to dig in, and then it expands. And so ivy can actually be quite damaging to structures, particularly like older wooden or stone structures. But Virginia Creeper is a bit nicer, and it actually climbs in 2 different ways. It uses tendrils like a grape, where it sends out a little, tendril and loops around something and then pulls itself up. But it also produces little sticky pads. So those roots that turn into tendrils, sometimes when they are no longer pulling themselves up, they will form a little sticky pad at the base. Actually did pull out an interesting quote about that from the American entomologist in 1870. There was an article about the leaves as workers and what leaves do besides just being food for bugs, because it was an article about bugs. But it says, but it can climb where a grape cannot, up the side of a brick or stone walls or bark of a tree or siding of a house. This it does by expanding the tips of the tendrils, covering them with a sticky substance, a natural prepared glue. This is held patiently in place until the glue hardens, when the tendrils make a double twist and hug the vine closer to the wall. So they stick to the wall, and when the glue dries, then they start twisting again to pull themselves closer, which is pretty cool. And I read that literally this morning, and I had to go out and look at it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really clear what's happening. You see these little like Spider-Man fingers stuck to the wall, and then there's like multiple twists in the little thing to like bring it closer. So I'll post some pictures of that on the Instagram one there. But I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. Going back to the Latin name Parthenocissus quinquefolia, we said quinquefolia is because it has 5 leaves. Parthenocissus means Partheno, or Parthenos means virgin in Greek, and cissus means ivy. And the reason why it's called virgin ivy is a little bit unclear. It's one of 2 reasons. One, there is a thing in biology called parthenogenesis, which is reproduction without pollination, or without, without a male and female, just
Virgin.
normally a female. Exactly, a virgin birth. But I couldn't find any where written that this genus Parthenocissus does that. And I was trying to find someone describing that. So there's another theory, is that they just called the genus Parthenocissus because it was the first one identified was the Virginia Creeper. And so it's called Virginia, which is based off of virgin. And so they called the whole thing Parthenocissus virgin ivy after Virginia.
Not necessarily the state.
Yeah, back when this stuff was founded, this whole area was Virginia, right? Everything was Virginia. So I'm not sure. Maybe it can undergo parthenogenesis, but I couldn't find anyone writing about that. But the whole genus is called Parthenocissus. So I like those little mysteries of names, and I could maybe dig deeper. But it's surprising. It's always surprising to me, what obvious questions about plants are not easy to find when you dig a little bit below just what Google gives you. Like, Google will give you the same answers over and over again, but then you're like, wait, what? Why? And it gets unclear very fast. So the berries of the Virginia Creeper are toxic to mammals, but not to birds, and they're toxic because they are high in oxalic acid. So that is actually a theme in the podcast. A lot of stuff that's toxic is toxic because of oxalic acid. And I was wondering why oxalic acid is toxic to humans but not to birds, because birds eat tons of oxalic acid berries. Same thing, ivy is a similar one. And apparently it's just the way that bird kidneys function is entirely different from the way human kidneys function. And so they can eat it no problem, and it doesn't cause any kind of like kidney stone situation. So that's interesting. Something related to the oxalic acid is there's a concept I just learned about called raphides, which are calcium oxalate crystals that can form in these very sharp shapes. And that is another way that plants that are toxic work, because those sharp crystals can cut, the mouth or the skin of things. And so the berries of these of Virginia Creeper are apparently full of these little raphides crystals, which I thought was interesting. And also, I know you're a chemist, so I thought I would try to throw in some chemistry facts. So calcium oxalate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another reason, actually, I think when I first got interested in Virginia Creeper, because I was reading about its high levels of oxalic acid or calcium oxalate, and a very common treatment for varroa mite, which is a major pest to honeybees, is to use oxalic acid to basically you sublimate it in the hive, and it can kill the mites, but it doesn't kill the bees. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was like, I wonder if I can, like, if I stuck a bunch of squashed berries in the hive, would that do anything? Probably not. But I like had this. I was like, oh, I've heard that before, oxalic acid in the honeybee context, but this plant is really high in it. And there's lots of other ones that are really high in it too. Rhubarb leaves are high in oxalic acid as well. So, and I think the last little bit I thought was fun is that there was at one time a train called the Virginia Creeper, which was named after the plant, but also after its slow movement up the mountains in Virginia. And I found a little quote from a book about the Virginia Creeper that I thought was fun. It said, "The creeper's whistle, known for its chilling, eerie quality, sounded for the last time in 1977, and the tracks were removed that year. I can't describe it," Greer remembered. "It was a whistle that we got so used to. When it all quit, we really missed it." So the train named after the plant is no more, but there is apparently now a trail called the Virginia Creeper Trail, not named for having so much Virginia Creeper, which it probably does, but named after the train that used to go there. So they turned the path of the train into a hiking trail. So yeah, that's Virginia Creeper. Any
Cool.
questions about Virginia Creeper? Anything you want to
I'm
know?
just trying to get my head around it. It has analogs to, or it's analogous enough to ivy. So I'm just thinking of a deciduous ivy and imagining it loses its leaves and then comes back where it was. It leaves this network of sprawl behind it.
Yeah. It leaves like these bare woody vines in place, and then it sprouts back. And so in some ways it's a different look in the winter on a building that's covered with Virginia Creeper versus ivy, but it's still a cool look. You still have these cool, like, it's a little bit when you see like a grapevine. Actually, grapes are similar, right? They're a deciduous vine, and Virginia Creeper is in the grape family, where ivy is not. Ivy is, maybe that's not true. Ivy might be in that same family. It's a big family. People talk about family in botany a lot, and its families are huge. It's the genus, which is a little bit smaller, but so maybe, I'm not sure if ivy's in the grape family or not. But anyway, yeah, the deciduous quality of it is interesting. And one thing that's really nice when I first saw it the first year is that brilliant red is one of the reddest leaves in this area. Like, we don't get as red as far up in Maine with a lot of trees here, but the Virginia Creeper is like brilliantly fire red, which I'll probably post a picture of that too. I think I have a good one from a few falls ago.
And flowers?
The flowers, I haven't observed the flowers that much, but I think they're really small, so they don't really, they're not super showy. I might be wrong about that. So apologies, audience. It's one of its main qualities, the flowers, I would say. But the berries are these little kind of like purpley berries that kind of sit there, and they look pretty, but not edible. So yeah, that's Virginia Creeper.
Thank you for telling me about Virginia Creeper, Steve.
So you're welcome. Next time I'm in Ireland, I'm going to look out for gorse, and if you come visit us again, I'll show you all of our Virginia Creeper.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Chug along like the old Virginia Creeper. Down among the mountain laurel, I'm gonna meet you. Baby, stoke my fire so we can make it home tonight.
This song is called New Virginia Creeper by Old Crow Medicine Show. It's one of at least a few songs about the Virginia Creeper, the train, not the plant.
I'm the new Virginia Creeper tonight.
My guest on this episode of Rootbound was Eoin Quinlan. Eoin is a chemist living in Liechtenstein. He would also like you to know the correct spelling of Eoin, which is E-O-I-N. Rootbound is hosted by me, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Krikascota. Fake ads by David Lani. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, but if you can go outside, perhaps go for a stroll, but just be aware of gorse fires.
Thanks to you.